Hello students and welcome to the first of several Photopea tutorials that we're going to be doing in our digital image manipulation unit. Before I get started, I just want to note that I have keystroke logging and mouse movement and click logging enabled on my computer just in case you're not sure which keys I'm pressing. I usually try to say them as I'm doing them, but if for whatever reason I don't, you'll notice in the lower corner there is a little running menu that shows you what I've been doing with the mouse wheel. That's the middle wheel and the middle mouse button, the right mouse button, or the left mouse button, the right mouse button, etc., as well as any key clicks. So as I'm going through these on the screen, you should be able to track what exactly I'm doing as we are completing the skills. So this is what we're going to be covering in this first tutorial. We're going to start with the general navigation. By this point, you should have been able to log into Photopea and create an account. Ensure that you are actually logged in with your account. If you're ever not sure, just click on the account button up here, and it should show you your information up there. And if you're not logged in, it'll let you log in. Just use your SPSD Google account to log in. You can use a personal account too. It doesn't matter to me, but I find it helps to stay logged in. And we'll start at the top. Okay, there's this menu, this opening menu here that allows you to open files from Google Drive, shared drives. This device is the computer that you're going to be working on, so it's sort of a duplication of some of these. I usually just skip all that and go right to the file menu and either create a new file or open something that already exists if I'm going to be doing some alterations. I'll go to new here and just show you how we could start the basic project. So you can name your project, you can pick your height and your width in pixels or in percent, millimeters, inches. I'll let you know which of those we're going to use for any given one. And then your DPI is your pixels per inch resolution. If you're working with stuff that might need to be printed later, you're going to want to dial that DIP up to about 300. It does slow down Photopea a little bit. The higher the resolution, obviously, the more work the computer has to do. For most things, we can go with about 72. That's about the most you can see, your eye can pick out on a high definition monitor. Resolution for print is typically a lot higher than the resolution that you're going to see on your monitor. And then just the background. There's a bunch of sort of presets here if you're building something for an established program like Twitter or Facebook or whatnot. There's stuff, common print sizes, common screen sizes. So if you're making a high definition movie, you might want to pick say a title screen for a high definition movie. You might want to pick the full HD, or there's sort of the lesser version of HD, or all the way up to 4K if you've got that technology. And then there's some templates that you can search through and type in keywords to search for them. So if I start a new one, if I start a new full HD, you'll notice it runs by pixels. So if I create this, I'll just leave it as new project. You'll notice that it gives me a canvas. The canvas is by default white in the background, but again, you can change that if you want. And then everything outside of that is not going to display on your image, but you do need a little extra room to work sometimes. Up at the top, you'll see a ruler, and on the left side, you'll see a ruler. And if you right-click inside that area, you'll notice you can change it to pixels. So there's your 1920 by your 1080. That's why it's called 1080i or 1080p. Or you can change it to, millimeters, centimeters, inches, whatever you want. I usually keep it in inches, and that's just sort of a throwback to working with print media, where most of the time you're dealing with measurements in inches, even though we're technically supposed to be the metric system in Canada. Print industry still uses inches. And if I was making something for a movie project or something like that, I would definitely change it to pixels so I have an idea of where the edges of the screen are. Within these rulers, if you just do a left click and drag, you can bring out something called a guide. And the guide just helps you line up objects. And you can toggle them on and off if you want. I believe it's in the view menu, and you'll see your clear guides, lock guides, add guides. If you add guides, you can add them in a very specific place. So if I wanted to add a guide right in the middle of this screen, I would do 1920 divided by 2. I guess that would be 950. It's going to give us 1900, so 960 should be right in the middle, and then 1080, half of that is going to be 540. So that should give me dead center in the middle of my screen. And then if you find that they're getting in the way, you can either hide them or get rid of them in that same menu. So you can clear your guides here if you want to. It just takes them away. So that's sort of general opening a document and allowing us to get to work. The menus that you have, we're just going to leave the default menus the way they are. They're pretty good. Photopea is essentially a Photoshop clone, and it does, I'd say, 90% of the things that Photoshop can do, and it does them very well. But because it's not a program that's installed on your computer, depending on the speed of your internet and whatnot, how much memory you have in your computer, it can take a little longer to do some of the tasks than you might see with a Photoshop, but it's completely free software, whereas Photoshop is quite expensive. This is available for everybody. It's in a web-based format. You don't have to download anything to your computer or install anything, so that makes it a great option for this class. And because most of the tools and the locations line up and look the same that they would in Photoshop, if you choose to carry on and take some more classes or get into the industry or whatnot, the layout that you've used here and the menus are virtually identical to what you'll see in Photoshop. So you should be able to transition right over to Photoshop. Some basic sort of keystrokes and shortcuts that'll help us navigate a little quicker. They're really important. It takes a little while to master them, but you'll find that it comes pretty quickly with practice. So the more of these projects we do, the better you're going to get. I'm going to open a file right now and show you, just an image inside our Photoshop practice images. You should have downloaded that before you started this tutorial. If you didn't, maybe pause the tutorial and make sure you go open that Photoshop practice 2022 folder, because it's got all the images that we're going to use for our practice. And I'm just going to bring out, right now, I'll just bring out the box.jpg to demonstrate some of these things. So I opened up this picture, and you'll notice up at the top here, I've got both a box and the new project file that I created. So you can have multiple tiles or tabs open at once, and that's going to be very handy if we're transferring things from one image to another. It's going to allow us to do that very easily. The reason I brought this box image up is I want to have something to show you as I'm navigating the document. So here's some very important navigation things that we're going to need to do in Photoshop. A lot of Photoshop is done very close into an object, oftentimes down to the pixel level. And so you're going to need to be able to zoom in and pan your document around and move it without always having to go up to the view and then zoom in, zoom out. You can use keyboard shortcuts for this, but I find that the mouse is by far the easiest way. The default for panning up and down is just your mouse wheel up and down. If you hold down the Alt key while mousing up or mousing down, and this will be a little different for Mac users. I'm not a Mac user, but I'm sure you'll find out it's probably the Option key or something like that. If you hold down that Alt key and you spin the mouse wheel, it allows you to zoom in all the way down to the pixel level, and then scrolling back to you zooms out basically as far as you want to go. Keep in mind that when you're doing this, you're not actually making the image bigger or smaller. You're just basically moving how close your eyes are to the canvas. So even though it looks like the box is getting bigger, it's not. I'm just basically getting my eyes a little closer to the picture to do some fine detail work. So that's a very, very important movement or navigation inside of Photopea is zooming in. And when you're zoomed in, often it's a bit of a pain to zoom back out so that you can move to a different corner. By the way, when you're zooming in, it'll zoom to wherever your mouse is. So if I put my mouse on this logo and I'm holding down Alt key and I'm zooming in, you notice it goes on this AirC logo, zoom back out again, and then I go to this logo, zoom back in. So it sort of knows where you want to look based on where your mouse is. But when you're zoomed in, let's say I'm doing something up here and I don't want to zoom back out again, but I want to get to a different part of my document. Very easy to do that. You just hold down the middle mouse button and it turns into a little hand. The icon turns into a little hand and it allows you to pan while not zooming out. This is a little different than Photoshop, but the Photoshop version works too, where you use the space bar. Okay, use the space bar and you can move around. Okay, so that Alt, spinny wheel, and either space bar or middle mouse click to pan around while you're zoomed in is going to be very, very important. If you double click the middle mouse button, no matter how far zoomed in you are, it'll just zoom back out to a full screen version. So that's pretty handy as well. Instead of having to zoom back out and kind of fiddle with it to get it perfectly in your screen, you can just double click that and it'll go right back out. So those are sort of some of the key mouse movements that you're going to use to get familiar with it. I generally in these tutorials will be clicking on the icon so you can see exactly where I'm going when I'm selecting tools, but you'll notice if you mouse over any of the tools, there are letters inside of brackets. That's the shortcut for those particular tools. And once you get really good at using Photopea or Photoshop, you tend to just use the keyboard to access these tools. It's quicker than moving your mouse all the way over and grabbing the tool and coming all the way back. If you know that the move tool is the V key, you can just quickly hit V and it turns back into the move tool, and then you can move your image around or do whatever it is you want to do in that menu. Your main tool menu is by default on the left side, and that's where it is in most digital editing programs. You can move stuff around in most of them. Again, I'm going to keep them there. I'm going to keep the setup the way it comes at default, so nobody has to change anything around. If you are on your tools, you just hold down the left mouse button. It'll show you the options for each of these tools. So there's sort of a base tool, and then there's options that are very similar to it under a lot of these. Anything with that little sort of white thing in the lower right corner, there's multiple options for that tool, and you just gotta pick the right one. So these are sort of healing tools. They're all do things slightly differently, but they're all kind of related as healing tools. And then these are brushes and pencils and things like that. That's your eraser, background eraser. You notice they're all kind of related to each other. So we'll go through these, sort of piece by piece as we need them in the tutorials. We're not going to use everything, and we are going to use several of the things in this top menu here. But by and large, I'll be showing you through each tutorial where I'm clicking, what tool I'm using, and why I'm doing it. Okay, as far as transferring things from one image to another, it's actually quite easy. Whatever you select, whether it be the entire image or a piece of an image, you can just go to the Move tool and drag it. Make sure you're holding down the mouse button, the left mouse button the entire time. You just drag it up to the next tab, and then if you hold it there long enough, it'll go down, it'll open up whatever picture that is, and then you can just drop it. And you notice my box is too big right now for that high definition screen that I created as our new project. I could still move it around and whatnot, but I'm going to have to make some adjustments if I want the entire box to show in the screen. When you're using the Move tool, it's really important that you have transform controls on, because if you don't have that on, you don't see the resize handles. And it might be, it's just more intuitive to have the transform controls on. None of these things show in your document, but it shows you these handles that allow you to rotate objects and resize them very easily just by clicking on the corners. If you want to rotate, you just go slightly off the corner and it'll do that. And then if you click anywhere in the image again, you can move it. So it's just click and drag stuff most of the time. And then you have to hit enter if you want to preserve any of the changes you made. I made this smaller and I rotated it a little bit just to demonstrate those tools. At the top, you'll notice there's a check mark and an X. If you want to cancel what you did and go back to where it was before, you just hit the X. And if you want to accept the change, get this sort of back where it was. If you want to accept the change, then you just hit the check mark. Or you can hit the enter key. I usually just hit the enter key. It's a little easier. And now it's been rotated, and you'll notice that the box on the outside has changed too. So when you resize it now, it stays in that same orientation. You can just drag and move things around. So that's how you can drag things from one file to another file. And if we go back to the original box file, you'll notice the box is still here. So when you drag something to a new menu, or to a new image, it doesn't just remove it from this one. It just says, okay, you want to copy, and you want to copy on this new image over here, so that's fine. So you didn't actually destroy anything on the old version. So that's basic navigation inside of Photoshop. I'm going to say that a lot because I'm used to working in Photoshop, but that's how it works in Photopea. And we'll kind of move on to these top menus now. Again, we'll go through these tools as we need them. You just need to know that that's where the basic tools for editing are. Some of these tools are replicated in the top menu here, but there are several that aren't on this main menu over here or these menus over here. And that's just because if you put every single tool in Photopea on the screen, it gets really, really cluttered. You can't see anything. So if we want to turn any of these off, if we're not using them a lot, we can always go to the Window menu item, and it shows you what's currently turned on. We've got our brushes, our channels, character. That would be like text, characters, fonts, and stuff like that. There's a color tab, history. History shows you what you've done, and you can move around in the history if you want to, say, go back 3 steps or go forward 2 steps, that sort of thing. Paragraph, also related to text. Paths, properties, swatches. We're probably not going to use some of these, so I might turn channels off. Okay, so sorry, I should probably go to, I thought you just had to click them. Maybe I have to go into the menu. It's a little funky. I thought you could turn them on and off kind of at will here, but it doesn't look like that's happening. You might have to find a different menu to turn those off. I'll do that in a later tutorial. It's not a big deal. The point being, it shows you currently what is on your screen, and it shows you what's not on your screen. So if we needed something on here that we didn't have, we could turn it on. For instance, we don't have color on. I'll probably use color at some point, so I'll turn that on right there. And when I go back into the view menu or the window menu, you can see that now color is turned on, and I've got a new tab up here for color. Let's see, if I close the swatch menu, then it's probably going to disappear from here. So yes, it did. So if there's something in here we don't need, we can get rid of it just by going to whatever that tool is, and then right click and then close, and then it won't appear anymore. Paths I won't need, so I might close that one as well. I'll use color, I'll use history, information's handy, properties is good, brushes are fine. CSS we won't use. If you feel like closing that, that's fine. Gallery, probably no damage, just leaving that on. So that's, just put that up here again. That's probably the stuff that we're going to use. If you match your menu to mine, you're in good shape. Okay, so just starting from the front, file is your basic file operations, creating new files, opening files that already exist. If you open in place, it means that you are already inside a document, and it'll take the other image and bring it right inside instead of opening a new tab. So if I wanted to put something else on this image, I could go open in place, and so let's say I grab this tomato here, I hit open, and you'll notice that it puts it on my screen. I just hit the check mark, and it's on there. Now, why can't I see it right now? All right, here's why I can't see it. The layers menu over here. I need to drag it to the top. Whatever's at the top is the closest to you. Whatever's at the bottom is the furthest away from you. So you notice my tomato image is over top of the box right now. And if I drag it down one, now the box is over top of the tomato. And remember, there's white space in both of these images. So that's why you're seeing that. That's why you're seeing that little white thing there. And I'm going to show you how to get rid of that in other tutorials, but this is just basic navigation. When you're doing things like that, you're going to want to make sure that your layers are named appropriately. Not such a big deal if you have 3 or 4 things on your image, but when you're working with bigger projects, you might have hundreds of files over here in your layers, or hundreds of layers, and if you don't have them named appropriately, it can be tough to tell what is what. And especially with really tiny objects, not such a big deal when you got this big tomato that you can just kind of grab. But if the thing is, that big, I might not know it's there. I might lose it in some other color or something like that. So I want to know that that's a tomato, so that when I look at it, I turn it on, I turn it off. I want to make sure that I know that I'm actually working on that layer. So I'll zoom in a little bit here and grab that, make it bigger again, back out a bit, and so what I might change right now is this background is actually the layer that the box is on. So I would change the name of that. Now, changing the name of any layer is easy. Just double click on it with the left mouse button and then name it somewhat appropriately. So that's our cardboard box. So I know I got my white background, cardboard box, tomato. You can show and hide things on the layer menu by just clicking on the eye. So if I click on the eye for tomato, it doesn't delete the tomato. It's still there. I'm just hiding it because maybe I want to work on the box layer a little bit and I don't want the tomato in the way, or I don't want to see it. And that works for every one of the layers, including the background layer. You'll notice on the background layer there's a lock, and that's by default. You can turn that lock off if you want, or you can turn it back on again by clicking the little lock in this item. If you have a layer locked, it means that you're not able to edit it in any way. So let's just go to the box layer right now. I'm going to turn off or hide the tomato layer. And I'm going to just draw with a brush on top of this layer. So first off, I want to make sure I'm on the box layer. And now I'm just going to go grab a brush, and the default color is black. That's fine. I've got my brush tool, and I'm going to draw over top of the box. So you notice when I turn the box layer off or hide it, that little pen stroke goes away too. Now, when a layer is locked, so I'm just going to Control Z. By the way, Control Z works for going backwards in your history. That's pretty common across most computer programs. So Control Z, Control Y. Sometimes I don't do Control Y. Okay, so step forward is Control, Shift, and Z. And that's actually pretty common. That's the way it is in Photoshop too. Sometimes programs have Control Y as going forward and Control Z is going backwards. Control Z is just basically I messed something up, but I want to go back quickly, so hold down the Control key and then hit the Z. If you want to, you say, oh no, I actually did want that, then you could go Control Shift Z, and it'll go forward in your history instead of backward. You'll get used to that pretty quickly. I rarely go up to the history. I usually just use multiple Control Zs and Control Shift Zs to go forward and backward. I was showing you the lock, so I'm on the box layer. I got rid of that pen stroke that I did. I'm going to lock the box layer. And now you'll notice if I try to draw on it, it won't let me, and it gives you a little message at the top saying this layer is locked. So oftentimes if you're working with things like brushes and tools that are actually adjusting layers, you might want to lock everything except for the layer that you're working on, just to prevent overspray and things like that onto other layers. So right now I've got the box and background locked off. So I should only be able to affect the tomato layer, and I'm on the tomato layer, and you'll notice that I'm able to draw, rasterize it, no big deal there. You'll notice I'm able to draw on the tomato layer, but as soon as I try to go off the tomato layer, okay, into the box layer, it won't let me draw. If I go to the background, it won't let me draw because they're locked. Now, I was able to go off of the tomato, the edge of that tomato image, because the layer is actually treated as the entire canvas. So it's on the tomato layer, but it didn't actually go over to the box layer when I went outside of that tomato drawing. So all of those lines, even though they look like they're going on other layers, are all still technically part of that tomato layer. We'll be working with the layer menu a lot in this class because you're going to have multiple adjustments and edits to your images, and a lot of that stuff is going to come on different layers that you're going to have on top of each other. So you're going to be playing around in here a lot, and you'll kind of pick that up as we go through the tutorials. If you want to add a new layer that's just a blank layer that you can do whatever you want with down here, you could just add a layer with the new layer, and if you want to get rid of one, remember you can rename it, new layer, whatever. And if you want to get rid of it, you can just drag it down to the trash can, or you can select the layer and then hit the trash can and it's gone. So you'll definitely use those quite a bit. I want to draw your attention to the background layer right now because it's important that you understand the difference between white and nothing. In image editing programs, white's a color, so white will show up on top of other things. If I draw on the background here, whoops, if I draw on the background here, you'll notice how it goes behind that white that's around the edge of the box. Because white is a color. White is not nothing in an image program. What is transparent is a gray and white checkered background. So if you see that, that means that literally is nothing. There's no color there. Your image is cut out. Anything that's in this checkered background isn't going to display on any other layer. If I drag that tomato layer down, just go to the move tool here. If I drag that down, you'll notice that there's white around the tomato as well. There's white around the box. And right now my background is hidden, but if I turn it back on, it's white. So if I were to take this image and I were to put it, say, on a black background, you would see the rectangular edges and all of the white in there. If I turn the background off, or if I hide it right now, and I start maybe erasing things on either of these layers, if I go to the box layer and I say, I want to get rid of some of this white. This isn't the best way to do it. I'll show you better ways, but just for example, if I'm going to lock the tomato layer right now because I don't want to accidentally hit the tomato layer. If I use the eraser tool over here and I start erasing things, you'll notice that it goes to that checkered background. Okay? And if I go up higher, you'll notice you'll be able to see the tomato. Now the tomato is behind the box layer, which means it's further away from your eyes. But as I get rid of that white on the edge of the box layer, it's going down to a transparent layer so you can see what's underneath it. And that would be true as well if I were to grab this tomato and put it like right in the middle of the box. You can't see it right now because this is over top of the tomato. It's hiding it. But now if I go to the box layer and I start erasing where I think that tomato is, you'll notice that it's going to create a transparency within that box. And it's permanently gone, by the way. So if you delete something, you can't get it back aside from using the history tool. But now I'm seeing through the box layer to the tomato layer down below, and that's how those things work. If I move the box around now, you'll notice that hole is still there, and we're going to use that to our advantage in several of the tutorials. That's just a quick overview of what you've got going here with the layer menu and how to add layers and how to delete layers, how to drag things around, how to create images that have multiple layers and multiple different types of edits and whatnot. When you are ready to save this, if you go to save as PSD, that's what you're going to have to do first always. And I would recommend saving fairly often. If you've already got something saved, you could just hit Control-S to sort of resave it. But when you are handing in your projects, most of them you're going to have to hand in the PSD file so that I can see all of your layers, all of your edits, everything that you've done. I don't want to just see the final product. I want to make sure that you've used the right tools and you've done the right things. So if you go to File and you save as PSD, what it's going to do is it's going to pop up one. This is not inside the program. This is one of your computer's windows, and it's just asking you where you want to save this. You're going to find the proper folder. You're going to call it what you want to call it, and then it should make sure that you've got it saved as a PSD file. And as soon as you do that, it'll automatically save it to your computer. If you ever want to make a flatter version of it, so without the layers, and the reason you'd want to do that is because it'll make a much smaller file. For instance, let's say you're really proud of one of the projects you did, and you wanted to, you post it on Facebook or show it to a family member or something. You don't want to send them the PSD file. A, they won't be able to open it because they probably don't have image editing software. B, it's more than they need. It's all the tools, it's all the the history, and they become big files. For instance, a file that might be a couple hundred kilobytes just as an image, a regular flat image, might be hundreds of megabytes in a PSD format, depending on what has been done to it and all the alterations that have been done to it. So the way that you do that, if you just want to export something quickly to show it online or send it to somebody, is you go to File, go to Export As, and then you can pick one of these. JPEG's pretty standard. I usually use PNGs because they allow you to preserve these transparencies in the background. It doesn't show up as black and white checks. It's nothing in the file. So you can do that with a PNG. You can't do that with a JPEG. If I were to save this as a JPEG, all of this white and gray checkered transparency would just automatically be converted to white. And therefore, if you took this entire image when you were done and put it over a black background, you would see all the white from corner to corner on this thing. We've already used we're going to use SVG files in our vector-based unit, so don't worry about that for now. And GIFs are typically for graphics and things that don't have a whole lot of photorealistic colors. They're just a smaller file. They're easier, they're better for processing, icons and things like that. Whereas PNG and JPEGs are better for photorealistic things, things that might have been taken with a camera. And PDF, I'm sure you're familiar with already. They're just they're portable document files, is what it stands for. And they're just files that, are basically designed so that any computer in the world can open them up and you can view them, but you can't edit them. So most of your assignments in this class and things like that are downloadables, are PDFs. So you can download them, you can see them, you can scroll through them, but you can't change them and modify them unless I let you. So that's the export menu. That's going to be pretty handy. We won't be doing any printing in this class. Don't worry about these ones. We're probably not going to use those as well. And there's an automate tool here that you're also probably not going to use. Edit gives you basic functions that you're going to see in other programs, and that's the stepping forward, the stepping back, copy, cut, paste, even though we have better ways to do that. We're going to use fill and stroke a lot. We're going to use transform, free transform a lot, and things like that. We'll go through a lot of these as we're working through the tools. Adjusting images, there's lots of tools built in to help you change colors and change exposure and basically take photographs that you may have taken with your phone or your camera and make them better, clean them up a little bit. You can change the size of the canvas, the size of the entire image, which includes everything on it, and you can rotate and flip things as well. We're going to use those for sure. Most of the layer stuff we're going to do over here in the layer menu that you can see, so that's pretty easy. We're going to use the select menu a bit, but typically I actually like to do these with like keyboard shortcuts. It's just quicker. And we'll use a couple of filters along the way, and we'll get into that in a different tutorial. For your view, make sure that you got your rulers turned on. They're turned on by default, but you're always going to want to have some guide as to how large this image is, so that you're sure that you're working with the right size image, the right size, the right resolution, etc. You could turn them off, but I definitely don't leave them on. Have the snaps on, and snaps to the guide, grid, slices, document bounds. These are the important ones, the guide and the grid. We can turn those off if they get in our way, but I don't think they will. And then I already showed you about the other guides. I showed you the window menu. And there's other stuff in here that you're not going to use at all. So we'll get to some of those, but just be aware there's a top menu there. There's a lot of menus over here for things that we commonly use. If I just need to get a color really quickly, I can just go grab whatever shade I want by playing around with these sliders. And you'll notice that down here, that color is changing. That's your basically your foreground color, the thing that your brush is going to paint in or your pencil is going to paint in, that your shapes are going to be in, that sort of thing. So I like to have that one on just because it's very easy to grab a specific color. And the history is normally where I have it defaulted. The last thing I want to tell you about menus for Photopea is that there is a submenu for most of the tools. So you select the tool with this menu here, and then you'll notice at the top there's a context-sensitive menu that changes depending on what tool you're on. Okay, so basically you pick the tool, and then up here you can play with the options. A lot of the options also have easy keyboard shortcuts that I'm going to show you. But quite often I either don't know the keyboard shortcut or I can't remember it, so I can go up here and adjust things manually. So for your text tool, you'd have the font and the size and bold and center and left align and things like that. And for the eraser tool, you've got flow and opacity, which just basically means how much you're erasing at a time. If I turn down the opacity and start erasing the box layer, you'll notice, by the way, brush, you'll use this a lot. Brush bigger is the square bracket key. It's up on the top left of your top right of your keyboard, and then the other square bracket is to make your brush smaller. That one's definitely one you want to learn. You don't want to go up here and change your brush size every time. So I've got a brush here, and I turn down the opacity, and you'll notice now when I'm deleting, it's not deleting the entire box. It's just kind of deleting pieces of it, but you can still see pieces of it. And if I turn my opacity up, it's going to delete everything every time I click or drag. So, little options like that, you will go up to the top menu to use those within any given tool. And you'll see that a lot. I'll just make sure that I'm showing you which way we need to go or what you need to click on. So that's a very basic run through of the menus and the way that you can interact with your documents and navigate your documents. These skills, again, the more you do them, the better you'll get at them, and you'll find that you're able to do the work a lot quicker. Again, there's some sort of magic tools that will help you do things automatically in Photoshop, but if you want to do a really good job, a lot of the time you're going to be getting in really close, and you're going to want to be able to quickly move your document around, and you're going to want to be able to quickly zoom out and zoom back in on something else. So make sure that you practice those as we're going through the tutorials, and it'll make your life a lot easier. All right, so that's all I've got for now, and look for the next tutorial where we're actually going to start applying some of the skills that you're going to need for the assignments from the fundamental image manipulation skills numbers 1 and 2, which are the introductory skill building assignments before you get to some of the more creative work.